you get a little prep time. These folks have already come to the debate with some things on their mind. So we're going to go right into 7-minute rounds. Each speaker is going to stand up and talk for about 7 minutes. And hopefully they'll be able to fulfill that time. But at the beginning and the end of each round, the first minute is protected, and the last minute is also protected. Between those 2 points, individuals on the opposing team are able to stand up and ask questions called points of information, and from there, the person on the podium on the opposing team will be able to address these concerns or questions or deny them. And after that, we go from team to team in the order of, we just go back and forth. So I guess right now I'd like to introduce our team so we can get going. On the government side, we have Jacob Klein. Yeah. We have Karen. I'm not Karen. Sorry. Nelson. We have Karen Nelson. We also have Justin Irving. And Sam Natale. On the opposition side, we have Danielle Goldscheider, Mandy Hall, and Mandy Frank. So you guys ready to debate? Yes. All right, let's go.
All right, Jacob.
We are coming up to one of the most important elections ever. This has made me really excited. And I stopped voting for a few years, and now I'm psyched. I voted in the primaries, and I'm pumped about this election. We have 2 amazing candidates and 2 amazing vice president candidates coming up. We saw in the primaries how Hillary proved that we want a woman in power. And we have Sarah Palin coming in on the Republican ticket. Obama proved that we are really ready for change. And McCain is now advocating for change. Now, we all know one candidate here, one team here is better than the other. All right? So, I'm going to get into the definition of what we're arguing today. Just with a little introduction. Everybody's been encouraged to vote at some point. You know, whether it's the class elections, y'all been hassled at the library. Have you gone in and voted yet? Have you emailed in your vote for SGA? You know, for state levels. You know, a lot of people know about Carisha Ram. Go Carisha! Right? People are running. People are encouraging you to vote. And a lot of international decisions, they're all made by voting. So today, we're debating whether we should be voting in this current presidential election and the future presidential elections.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
What's the point of casting a vote if it doesn't count?
Because it's an incredibly powerful position, and it does count. It totally counts.
Sir.
No, thank you, ma'am. I'm going to preview my points that I'm going to be discussing today. First, voting is a good way to make decisions. And second, representation is effective. Okay? So, first, voting is fair. It's the right way to make decisions, it's a good way to make decisions, and it's a fair way to make decisions. You know, sometimes we get a little too full of ourselves with voting. You know, we say, everybody gets a vote. Well, we know it's true. Sometimes people don't get a vote. A lot of cases in this country, people haven't been able to vote because they're of a certain race or a certain ethnicity. But now, we've struggled, we're still struggling, and we have probably the most fair election laws that we'll have. And hopefully they'll get better. Yes, ma'am?
Sir, you talk about fairness. Can you explain to me how the Electoral College is proportionally fair?
Well, you're right. It's not 100% fair. But it is pretty damn good. And I'd like to see what you guys are going to propose in boycotting this. No, thank you, ma'am. You know? So there's a lot of problems with voting. But voting is efficient. Voting's quick. It comes to a decision fast.
But sir,
No, thank you. We only have it once every 4 years. And, you know, what would be the opposite of voting? What are they going to propose? They're going to say, we shouldn't do voting, we should do consensus. All right? Well, I went to a boarding school where we did everything by consensus in our student government. And let me tell you, the one issue, we spent a whole year deciding how much cheese to buy. Is that effective? No, it's not effective in a group. Okay, maybe it's effective when there's just, you know, 2 people in the group, you know? I vote we get married, I vote no. Consensus is good then, but not in a governmental level. We want voting. We need something that's efficient. It's not perfect, but it's efficient. All right? And that's why we need to go out and vote. That's why. Because it is the right process. It's not perfect, but it's the right thing to do. It's the way our system works. There's a lot of power invested into it. And you get to choose who gets to be the president, and you get to choose who's going to represent you. I'm moving on to my next point. And I'm talking about the power of the president, you know, in representative democracy. The president is so powerful. It distinguishes our nation from other nations because we give the power to the president. In other nations, it's more dispersed. There's prime ministers, there's presidents, there's more dispersion in the government. But we have a lot of power invested in our president. And this means that our president can make the government very unique. He can shift the government in very different ways. And as we've seen with the Bush administration, they can really screw it up if we have the wrong person in that position. So that is another really essential reason why we should be voting. Yes, sir.
Yes, he can screw it up if we have a president that we didn't elect.
Well, we did elect him, actually. And the system's not perfect, but it does work. I'd like to see your alternative and how ineffective that would be. 6 months of cheese decision. In conclusion, if you think it's bad now, go ahead and don't vote. Go ahead. But it'll get worse because you don't go out there and vote. It'll get 10 times worse. All the problems that the opposition is going to bring up with voting, you know, all the ones that are already addressed for the most part, like, those are going to get worse because you don't participate. Because you're not using the system, it's easier for them to take your rights away. If you just walk away and say, oh, it's screwed up, when you turn around 10 years later and realize, I should have done something, I should have voted for that candidate instead of letting another 4 more years of Bush go on, you would have wanted to vote. Okay, thank you. Oh, yeah.
what do I press?
Start.
That would be smart thing to press. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start up this debate by saying I am very proud to be on the side that stands up for the people that have been disenfranchised of the vote, who are ignored by politicians, who are confused and frustrated with the way our political system has turned. I am proud to stand with this side who shuts it the door and says, no, this isn't going to happen anymore. First, I'm going to do little rebuttals, and then I'm going to go into my 2 points, the nature of our government, and it's all the same. So on to my rebuttal. Okay, he said now is an amazing time for the vote. It's an amazing time. We have amazing candidates. But we have the same exact system. Our system is broken, people. There's something wrong with it. If we were able to disenfranchise African Americans for as long as we did, what makes you think we're not going to do it again? As Jacob said, the power is in the hands of the president. So why give him that power again when he or she keeps on making all of these mistakes? Sit down. His next point was that we're ready for change. But like I said, if we were ready for change, we would change the system. He also said voting is a good way to make decisions. But I don't think those people in Florida whose all their votes were thrown down the drain, were just lost for no good reason, would think that now that the voting system is a good system. He also said that representation was effective. And he said it's quick and it's good. But just because something quick is quick doesn't make it good. Should we accept the voting system, the system we have, because it's quick? No, ladies and gentlemen, we should change the system. We should work a little bit harder to have a system that's fair for everyone. He also said that we give our power to the president, and that makes our government unique. You're right, it does make it unique. Our government is so broken, we only have two parties that don't even represent all the individuals that are in this country. You're right, there is a problem. Why are we giving all of our power to one person like Bush that has messed everything up? Yes.
You said that we have problems in our system that we need to fix them, but why is this mutually exclusive from voting? Why can't we vote and fix the problems in our system? And wouldn't it be more effective to fix the problems in our system once we were a part of that system by voting?
As I will go into that, the point is the system. The point is the way our fundamental voting rights are set up. The point is the nature of government. You can't argue both. You can't argue voting, which we're fundamentally against, and changing the system when we view the system as changing voting. Going on to my first point. First of all, we don't have a parliamentary system. In this government, not everyone's represented. The ideas for fiscal war, social values, all those things are not represented in our system. This means that we have to compromise. We have to compromise in our election. In a parliamentary system, the compromise is made afterwards. There's a compromise made. Parties have to learn to work with each other, but we don't have that system. We have a system where one person is elected and the compromise is made before the election. You have to make a decision before the person even gets into power. There's no compromise. There's my plan, your plan, which have essentially merged into the same thing. That means that you and I, as students and our interests, are never actually represented. What I, as a woman, as an individual, is never going to be represented by the president because there's not someone there. This goes into my next point. It's all the same. Both McCain and Obama have said they want to raise spending. Both of them have made points about our education system. And it's all the same. There's confusing, and this goes into my next point about confusing language. Politicians, when they're arguing for something, all of them say, we want to help children, we want the environment to be better, we want things to change. They all say these things, but they never actually explain themselves. They never actually say their policies. All we hear is, we want to help the children. This can be illustrated by the No Child Left Behind. Bush said, we want to help the children. We want to help the children. But what did he do? He took money away from the schools and gave standardized testing, so the teachers had to teach the test. But someone in Minnesota that was listening to Bush would have thought, oh, he just wants to help the children. And it's completely nonpartisan. It happens in both the Democratic and the Republican Party. People hear this language, but it's never actually explained to them, and it's the nature of government. My next point going on is about lobbying. Lobbying is another huge issue that we face in Washington. Lobbying parties and corporate interests play a huge role, and it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, they still have to bow to these corporate interests. In 2001, ExxonMobil was the only oil company to meet with the State Department to discuss the Kyoto Protocol, which was later they didn't join. Not to mention the fact that in the 2000 election, ExxonMobil spent $1.4 million in political contributions, only second to Enron. And I think we all know what happened to Enron. They spent that much in political contributions so that their interests could be put forward. And these oil interests are for Democrats and Republicans. No matter what happens, this oil lobby is going to continue. This oil lobby that takes no interest in the environment, which hurts our environment, and completely destroys the democratic things that our nation holds so key. Karen.
Are these not just influences and contributions, but are these lobbyists actually sitting in the House and making the final vote?
I'm glad you said that, Karen, because actually they're so powerful. Now they are. ExxonMobil actually had an influential committee member on the environmental committee dismissed because they didn't want it in a controversial member. So yes, actually they are making the decisions, and that's something key that you should all know when you vote. The oil lobby is making your vote. Individual, what have I talked to you about today? One, the role of the oil lobby, the role of lobbyists and how they hurt our system. Two, the nature of government. Our system has broken people. Our system has disenfranchised, has put people down, and has refused to actually change. We're in the same place that we were 25 years ago because the system is still the same. So burn your ballot, pick it up, and do a change. Now is a symbolic time to put your foot down and say, we will not be complicit with oil interests and the government.
Universal Declaration of Human Rights states, whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights represents the equal and inalienable rights that symbolize democracy. I would like to start my speech off with some refutation of the last speaker, and then I would like to move on to my point, which is talking about how this functions within society. The last speaker's first point was about lobbying. She was talking about how lobbyists are corrupt and how it plays such an essential role in the voting process. I believe this is a falsehood. Lobbyists are influential, but as I mentioned in my point of interest, these lobbyists are not sitting in the House. They are not making these final decisions. They are not forcing these individuals to raise their hand or put their hand down and say, yes, I believe in this, and no, I don't. And not all candidates base their campaigns on lobbyist groups. The Democratic nominee for president, Barack Obama, has based his millions of dollars for his campaign on funding from individual contributions. These are $10 and $20 donations from citizens who believe in the idea of change. Her second argument was talking about the fact that we have no choice and the government in the status quo. The opposition would like you to believe that in elections there is no choice, and that all elections and candidates are the same. This is false. In the last two presidential elections, it has been the closest voting margin in history. I think we need to look at what this represents and the fact that these people are standing up and voting, and that we actually are becoming unison. No, thank you. There is a third-party system that exists within the United States. It is legitimate. An example of this is a recent election in which a third-party candidate, Ross Perot, received 20% of the vote. This is a substantial amount. Many people have this idea that any third-party candidates that exist in elections receive maybe 2% of the vote. They are actually meaningful and have a voice in this election process.
Karen,
Yes, sir.
do you think that might have had to do anything with the fact that, oh, I don't know, he was a billionaire?
The financial status of Ross Perot may have possibly played some sort of contribution, but what I really want to get at in my point is the fact that he represented a different party. He wasn't, no thank you, no thank you. He wasn't the typical Democrat or Republican. He represented another side and another way to the structure of our government and the fact that we can have a voice in politics. In my argument, I would like to focus on the function of voting within society. I believe that we need to protect the system that we call democracy in the United States. As Winston Churchill once said, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the other forms that we have tried. We know that a democratic nation does not function perfectly. I believe that both sides can agree on this. But we must do everything we can to keep it functioning. We have evolved as a nation due to the type of government that we have created. No, thank you. As citizens of the United States, it is essential for us to vote. Voting is our voice within the government, and as citizens, it is how we are able to express our beliefs. On a local level, we vote for education with school budgets. On a state level, we vote for representatives in the state legislature and Congress. And on a federal level, we vote for the president of our nation. The elections on these levels represent our government and political equality that exists within this nation. I believe that we need to look,
Karen,
yes,
how will my one vote make any difference in the presidential elections?
that is a great question. I think in this, thank you. I think in this debate, it's gonna be probably the major question of this debate, because we have the popular vote and we have the electoral vote, and so many people believe that your one vote won't matter. But what we would like you to think about is the fact that voting exists on a local, state, and federal level. And specifically in this presidential election, there are millions and millions of Americans. So you say, okay, how will my vote count? I would like your vote to count to stand for what voting means and has meant historically and has evolved over time. And I think we need to look at that in the facet of this debate. To extend some of the points that the first speaker brought up, is he really wanted to look at what we have seen historically. Susan B. Anthony represented the idea of women's rights in the passage of the 12th Amendment. She spent her entire life trying to get women the right to vote because she believed so much in political equality and the fact that women are as equal as men and that they should be able to own property and that they should be able to express themselves in voting. Historically, there are so many individuals that have tried to vote and have not been as successful but have been oppressed by this. And we need to look at this and realize that our vote counts and is meaningful. Sorry, you're out of order. I have talked about in this speech the fact that specifically in the Universal Declaration of Rights, we have this basic belief of equality. And politically, we represent this in one way, by voting. And we need to look at the fact that in society, voting is meaningful and that it represents something that we believe in and that we have an actual choice and ability to express our beliefs in the candidates and on every level within our society. Thank you.
Oh.
All right, everybody ready? All right, let's keep the ball rolling. My name is Lucas, and I'm going to begin by refuting some of the things that were just said by Karen and Jacob very succinctly, and then I'm going to go on to make my new point that the system, as illustrated by the Electoral College specifically, is so broken that until we recognize and remove ourselves from this intrinsically flawed system, that we cannot in fact move forward with the correct democracy that actually works, which is what we would like in the end. And they got up here before, and they talked they had a lot of flowery language, a lot of idealism, which I think is really great. College students at their best, right, folks? They said voting is a good way to make decisions. Democracy is fair. I don't disagree with any of these statements inherently. I think democracy is good. But I don't think our democracy is good. I think that voting can be fair, but do I think that our voting system is fair? Absolutely not. She got up here and she talked about the Universal Declaration of Rights. Okay. So, there are a lot of people who declare lots of rights. Does that mean people all over the world have them and have those rights enforced? Absolutely not. There is a strong separation between the flowery idealism that they would like to present to you and the real world problems that we are going to present to you. And if you find that our harms are much worse than their flowery benefits, then you have to vote and agree with us. No, sit down. Moving on to my point. Our electoral process and processes that encompass them are so broken that we must stop propping up a poor excuse for democracy. We must stop propping up this puppet government where our votes do not count, even though they tell us they do. We must not lend our support to a democratic facade that disenfranchises millions. My friends, we must not vote. Go ahead, Karen.
Okay, so if we're not going to follow this disenfranchised and flowered society, then what are we going to do?
Well, I'm not up here espousing fascism. I'm not up here espousing that we destroy democracy, because a lot of their points are going to get up here and talk about democracy is good, democracy is good, democracy is great, our democracy sucks. And there are a number of reasons that I'm going to illustrate upon to prove that. There are a number of ways to do it. We could change the electoral college, we could change the two-party system. There's any number of ways that we could go once we establish that we have a problem. Though we must first recognize that problem before we can move on, and I'm going to help us do just that. So, the system is broken, as we've explained. The American experiment called democracy we've lost it. And in reality, we never actually really had it, because throughout our history, we've disenfranchised, women, blacks, Asians, Native Americans. And now we're disenfranchising more. We're just not doing it as specifically into demographics. The most obvious target for the failed electoral system in which we exist is the electoral college, everybody's favorite target. A system where we ignore the vastly more numerous coasts who, because we already know what they decide, therefore they're not the swing vote. And instead we turn and we give influence to the far fewer, more swing votes, if you will. So what we're doing is that we're taking a power away from the majority and we're giving it to the minority. This doesn't sound like democracy, my friends. Where minorities don't get to contribute, where minorities in a state don't get to contribute to the vote for their president. Because you know what happens if you're a Democrat and you vote for a Republican in New York? A Republican gets 0 electoral votes. The Republican gets 0 points counted towards their total and towards their victory of the election. Is it fair? Is it fair? No, come back, Jacob. Is it fair to take away the minority rights of a state?
Well, I have a question for you. This system has been going on for a really long time, and we've had statistically very low voter turnout. How is even low voter turnout going to stop the system?
Well, because the problem is that voter turnout is low, but it's high enough. It's just high enough to say, we have your credibility, we have your consent to do whatever we want in your name. And I think that's one of the greatest tragedies, is the atrocities and the horrible things that are being committed by the government in our name. Not only in our name, but in the name of people who did not elect them and do not want them there. So, what does this system do, the electoral college systems, as I was saying? It takes power away from the quote-unquote ignorant masses. And that's what the Electoral College is designed to do, my friends. Make no mistake about it. It is a remnant of a past age when the politicians didn't think that the civilians and the citizens knew enough to vote. It's from an age in the 18th century where people were not informed enough to make the right decisions, so they relied on electors to make the decisions for them. Well, I've got a news flash for that time. 200 years have passed. And you know what? I think it's insulting to suggest that we are not smart enough, we are not informed enough, we are not capable enough of making our own decision, that we need to rely on a system that assumes that we are idiots. No, we're not. We are active and informed American citizens. So that's how their system works, even when it's successful. Which it is not, as we have seen in the 2000 election. In 2000, one of the few times, actually, that the Electoral College has delivered the presidential election to somebody who won a minority of the vote. So Bush won, allegedly, Florida by a couple hundred votes. And just as an aside, do you know how he won Florida by a couple hundred votes? Because the Supreme Court voted for him. The Supreme Court justices that were appointed by his father voted to give Bush the elections in a ruling that was the only ruling in Supreme Court history only applicable to one circumstance, completely dismissing 200 years of judicial precedent. Does that sound like democracy? That sounds like oligarchy and aristocracy to me. Please sit down. So, Bush won Florida by a couple hundred votes because of the broken judicial system and the broken electoral college. And what happened next? Bush became president, we invaded Iraq, and the rest, as they say, is history. And we think that's a tragedy. We think that's a bad thing. And you know what? If we could go back in time and change it, we would. But you know what? We're here and we're right now, so what can we do now? Nope, all of you sit down. So what do we do now? Do we keep voting? Do we keep voting like they suggest? Because they say, well, to do nothing is worse. But listen to what they're suggesting. We say our votes aren't counted, so they say vote some more. That doesn't sound like a very sensible conclusion. So should we keep voting? Should we keep supporting? Should we keep alive this system, which in reality disenfranchises us? No. Giving them the endorsement they need to continue controlling our lives is the wrong decision. Let us instead follow the example set forth by Henry David Thoreau when he implored us not to let ourselves become agents of injustice, not to be the change that we don't want to see, but to do all that is in our power to do. And that if you have, and I know people in this room have convictions, and I know many of you sit there and you think, things are messed up. I wish he wasn't our president. I wish I could do something about it. Well, you know what? Step back. Say no more. Say not in our names. Because it is in our name that they are committing these atrocities, that they are illegally waging these wars. And it is with our consent that they do these horrible things and they rule us illegally. Well, you know what? We're tired of having the blood on our hands for hundreds of years of disenfranchisement under a false democratic facade. We say it's time to start in a new direction, and we say that the system is so broke that we cannot fix it unless we remove ourselves from that process and build the system again. Because, my friends, the path of truth is illuminated by the torch of justice. And until we finally remove the darkness and the specter of ignorance that this side is providing us, we cannot move on. So if you do want to move on, and if you do want to fix the system, and if you do want to vote, vote opposition.
Someone timer. Hello everyone, my name is Justin. Sounds like a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best. The opposition has made some really good points about the flaws in American democracy. I'll admit, it's true. We go into ill-advised wars. We have a military budget, probably way out of proportion with what anyone needs. In fact, we have military personnel in over 100 countries. Yeah, we have some problems. We have lingering poverty, the occasional botched election. But they propose no mechanism through which abstaining from voting will result in a better outcome for all Americans. And I think that we ought to automatically win because of this failure thus far. All right. The rest of my speech will follow in this format. I'll present my argument and then refute each of their points as succinctly as possible. I propose that the right way to think about whether or not we should vote or not is to understand how the political system works. You see, politicians are rational. The rational politician behaves in a way that's perhaps unintuitive. The rational politician doesn't seek to maximize the benefit of the entire electorate. They don't seek to balance the desires of the elderly, minorities, young people, and those unborn. Instead, they seek to benefit those who will vote for them. This is a key point. George Bush, Barack Obama, John McCain, they're all thinking, who's going to vote for me? And they're going to cater to those voters. So when you don't vote, you throw out your opportunity to influence this process. Yes?
But then the politicians are just pandering to the audience, and isn't that a really bad thing? Because that gives us false hope that they're actually going to do something.
Absolutely, and that's why it's so important that we vote, because they have to pander to everyone. So, under the idea that we have rational politicians that seek to benefit their specific voters, we need to rethink what voting means. Older people want government services. They want Social Security, they want Medicare, they want new roads, they want military defense, they want prescription benefits and all of that. How do they get this? They have to get taxes, but the government doesn't want to tax them because then they won't vote for them. The only way, or a surefire way to run an election is to accuse your opponent of wanting to raise taxes. Who wants to pay more in taxes? So, what the government has done is they've created all these gigantic liabilities in Social Security and in Medicare that we're going to have to pay for and our children are going to have to pay for. Our parents will be long retired before the bill comes to them. The national debt is also a major point of a major thing that benefits today's workers. And again, we'll be the leaders and the workers of tomorrow that have to pay for this debt. Another way that we can consider today's benefits being passed on into the future is with Alan Greenspan's stock market and housing boom created by cheap money. It created a party for those in the working world of the 2000s, but it's creating a disaster for us who are about to graduate and go into the workforce. The youth vote in lower proportions than any other age demographic, and this means that they've yet to fully influence the system. If we could get all of the youth, or at least a larger proportion of the youth, to participate in the election, then the politicians, even today's politicians, would realize that they have to cater to the youth too. They have to balance the desires of everyone. That creates a filter, and through that filter, only the best laws can be passed. Clearly, if you don't vote, you'll be screwed. Now I'd like to move on and refute some of the opposition's points. they've proposed that we shouldn't vote because certain minority groups are disenfranchised. That's still true. We've had instances where election lines in black neighborhoods have been considerably longer than those in richer, whiter neighborhoods. But we've also come a long way. In the 1950s, blacks in the South would be hard-pressed to vote. But what happened was Americans voted for a president named Lyndon Johnson. They voted for a president named Lyndon Johnson who changed the system, who created civil liberties laws, and increased the ability for blacks to vote, yes.
Yeah, but then in 2000, our Supreme Court voted in George Bush, who went to war with Iraq and caused many problems. Who says this isn't going to happen again?
I think the majority of Americans wanted to go to war with Iraq. Unfortunately, that's the way the system works. It's not perfect, but it's the best we've got. And you've proposed no mechanism through which stepping away from this will prevent future wars. They've also complained that we don't have a parliamentary system, and that this is a bad thing. But if we really wanted a parliamentary system, we could vote for candidates who would support a broadening of government power. People don't seem to want that, or at least in large enough proportions, and we haven't had real candidates who've proposed decentralization. They've also proposed that all candidates are the same, and I have a lot of trouble believing this. One candidate wants to stay in Iraq for 100 years. Another candidate wants to raise taxes. The other candidate the same candidate wants to speak with Iran while the other one sang Bomb Bomb Iran to the tune of that 70s song. Also, you've complained about lobbies. I see no problem with lobbies. Lobbies are key to free speech. Any group of concerned citizens can form a lobby. We have lobbies for the elderly. We have lobbies for environmentalists. We have lobbies for minority groups. And we even have lobbies for corporations, the big evil corporations. I know, no one likes them. They're easy to pick on. But the fact of the matter remains that your target corporation, ExxonMobil, has a 100-year history in the United States, 100 years since Rockefeller founded it, employing Americans, injecting capital into the system, and raising living standards. Also, today, ExxonMobil employs 100,000 people. 100,000 Americans work for ExxonMobil. And beyond that, millions of Americans who own pension funds receive retirement benefits from ExxonMobil dividends. ExxonMobil's a giant corporation. Maybe they're evil. If you don't like them, form a lobby to block their power. But they have a right to speak their mind. You've also proposed that my vote won't count, so why should I bother? I answer that if you think that your single vote is useless, then think of the cumulative effect of that. I maintain that my single worthless vote is infinitely more powerful than your wasted vote. Thank you.
What is the United States of America? To team government, they seem to say it's the world's greatest democracy, where each citizen has their opportunity to get their voices heard through voting. However, when I stood up in a POI and asked, how will my vote count? Karen stumbled and never seemed to answer the question, other than say, we need to stand up for what voting means. Well, throughout my argument, my extension will talk about how voting is a hollow hope, how voting will not create change. Justin attacked us for not giving you a mechanism for how not voting will actually make a difference. But my extension will talk about how collectively not voting will be a symbolic tool for change and action, and how collectively not voting will be better than sending in a ballot. Now, first, to refute some of what Justin just said, he talked about how the president caters to different groups. Well, catering is very bad. Catering, first of all, divides us on certain issues. It says, oh, well, I must cater to the old and the young. They're two different groups of people. I can't cater them together. It only further divides citizens. I can't create a policy that will both satisfy the old and the young. I have to create two different policies. Also, catering dilutes what candidates can actually do, because there are so many voters, they cannot cater to all voters. No, thank you, Jacob. And also, they cater to one group, but then another group gets forgotten about. So no one is ever really happy with targeting and catering. And also, We live in the United States of America. Catering and targeting only further divides us. Justin talked about lobbyists. Well, he did say yes, there are other lobbyists. However, the most powerful lobbyists are the ones with the most money, the most corruption, and they corrupt our system. It's not the lobbyists that that have little influence, that have little money, that corrupt our system. It's the huge lobbyists, the oil lobbyists that Danielle was talking about, that corrupt our system, and we're saying no, it is enough. So now on to my argument. Side opposition in the beginning painted a nice illustration, a picture of the problems, the Electoral College, the lobbyists in our system today. We know there are problems. Our system is broken. We know that. We say no. We can no longer do this. We say that we must collectively say no and collectively withdraw ourselves from voting. And by having this symbolic action that we endanger the status quo, and once we eliminate complacency that comes with voting, because when you put your ballot in, when you say, oh, I'm voting, you are agreeing with the system. You say, yes, I agree to live under this system, and I agree that this system is correct. But when you withdraw yourself and say, no, I no longer accept the problems that come with our system, I'm no longer voting for this system, then you create a change. When we collectively say no, when we collectively, together, say we are not accepting the flaws within our system, you create a power vacuum that the government will see and be forced to change due to this power vacuum. Yes, Jacob?
Nothing you can do can take the power away from the president except moving to Canada. The system will stay if you don't vote.
Okay, well, I won't vote, and then I'll move to Canada. But you create a power vacuum against the status quo. It reverberates the system. The government sees this, and they say, oh, wow, we need a change. We will no longer be able to do anything under the current system. The people are now saying no. It was in the 1960s when, through protests, riots, and anti-war demonstrations, that the younger generation actually challenged the very structure of American society. Yes, Karen?
But was not that demonstration to actually get the right to vote?
Of course it was to get the right to vote, but the point is they made the change. They got the right to vote, and that was how change was created. They didn't send in their ballots and say, look, Mr. President, we would like the system to change. Let's vote on this. No, they marched, and they said, this is not right. We need to create a change. So that is what I'm saying we must do today. We must go and march on Washington again. Maybe everyone in this room and 10 of our friends and 10 of their friends. We go and put our foot down and say collectively, this is not right. Our system is messed up, and we will no longer stand for the injustices that our government has caused, for the corruption that occurs within the White House, for the corruption within local and national and regional systems. Enough is enough. And Jacob talked about, it is so crucial right now. Yes, now is crucial. Now is so crucial because we need to take a first step towards change. We are not even sure of exactly what is the problem, but we know there is a problem. We know that we can no longer continue to do this. We must, right now, if we want to have an impact and a voice in the future of where our nation is going, it is crucial to withdraw ourselves from the very system. Sorry. Why? Every day do we stand by and accept the system that we are living under? Why do we not question it? Why do we simply send in our ballots and become complacent within the system? Why, when we all know that there are problems within our government, do we simply participate in it and encourage it to grow, encourage the corruptions, encourage the injustices? Why? I no longer want to live in a nation where each and every one of us agree to what the government is doing, when we fully know and recognize that what it is doing is bad and should no longer be happening. I want to live in a nation where each and every one of us knows the power that we have as an individual to say no, to go and protest, to march against what the government is doing. We live in the United States of America, where each and every person has the opportunity for their voice to get heard. I no longer want to send in my ballot where it will get lost and my voice will not get heard, but it will be transferred onto a piece of paper and just another paper in the system. I want to do something. I want to have action and make my voice really heard. Make sure that the government knows we want change. And that's why I think it is crucial that we collectively and together withdraw our ballots and say we are no longer going to stand for what the government stands for. Thank you.
What we've just seen today is a debate between cynicism and optimism, between talk and action, between obscurity and history. They want to make you feel powerless. They want to make you feel anonymous. They want to say that when you vote, you're not counted. But at least when you vote, you are counted. If one person not voting doesn't make a difference, how much of a difference is someone not voting going to make? They want to make you feel powerless, but let me tell you something. I don't feel powerless, and I don't think you should either. Because when you vote, you exercise true power. A small piece of it, true, but you still hold it. And I believe that when we recognize the value of that small piece, then we can make a real difference in this country. So I'm going to speak to you to the 3 issues that really came out, and then go to the bottom line of what you should do in this debate. The first issue is, does voting work? They say no, we say yes. Their first and biggest reason was the Electoral College, the punching bag of the debate. They say that, oh, your vote doesn't count completely. But just because we pool our votes together and that I'm voting as part of a state doesn't mean my vote doesn't count entirely. And in fact, in like 99% of elections that have happened, you have seen no difference between the popular vote and the electoral vote. It's a fluke if it happens otherwise. So in this election, it's probably not going to affect you. So even if we banned the Electoral College tomorrow, it wouldn't make that much of a difference. Then they also talked about lobbyists. But lobbyists aren't really that big a deal. As my partner pointed out, there are lobbyists of lots of different. And as Karen pointed out, that the Obama's campaign has raised more money than any campaign of any country in the world ever. And he did it not through corporate lobbies, not through corporate money, but by a whole lot of people like me donating $5 when Sarah Palin's speech scared the crap out of me. It's that kind of activism that allows all of us as a group to get together and put our voices together. And that's the basis of voting. Then there's the idea that the candidates are too similar. But as my partner pointed out, there's a huge difference between the candidates. One of them wants to pull our troops out in 16 months. The other one wants to pull them out in 10,000 years. If this isn't a reason to go to the polls, I don't know what is. And then they say significance. This is your small argument. But voting really only takes 20 minutes, and it affects billions of people on the planet. If you can't take 20 minutes out of your day to make a small part in a decision that's going to affect the fate of this country and probably this planet, then you really need to reevaluate your position in the world and your sense of self-importance. And then she said that not voting collectively would do something. But if all of the youth not voting really did something, then we would have already seen the change. We've been not voting for years. Maybe now we should do something different. So, second question. Do you have a duty to vote? This is the why should you vote for others? And as our first speaker started, we've got 3 real components to this. First one is within society. Who doesn't vote within society? Children don't vote. And children are impacted. One candidate wants to help fix the public school system with more funding. The other one wants to say screw it and put them all in private schools. This is a big difference. And when you have this kind of difference on the behalf of somebody who doesn't vote, you have to do something for them. Unless you really don't care about kids and you don't have an opinion on how their lives should be impacted by the federal government, then you really do have to get out there and vote. Second was the argument from history. My great-grandmother couldn't vote. You don't have to go that far back to find someone in your lineage that didn't have the right. African Americans in this country didn't have the pragmatic ability to vote until maybe about 40 years ago. And are you so arrogant that you're not going to vote because you don't think your vote counts enough? What would somebody say to you after they fought for years to get the right, and you entitled, self-important something, are not willing to use the right that you've been given and just throw it away? That is so arrogant and so distasteful.
Sir,
yes, sir.
I think it's even more arrogant to suggest and placate them by saying they do have the right to vote when their votes get ignored election after election.
All right, their votes get ignored election after election. Like which ones? We said the 2000 election was a fluke, and in 2004 he got elected legitimately, and that's partially because of all of the Democrats that were registered to vote in the election had voted. We wouldn't have had another 4 more years. So if we want to make that same mistake again, by all means, go with the opposition. Another thing is the question of people abroad. We live in an international context, and as my partner pointed out, if you want bomb Iran, and there's a little Iranian girl who got her house blown away, are you going to be comfortable telling her, no, I didn't feel like voting, it's really not my thing. So, the third question that came out is why you should vote for yourself. And you all may be saints, but I'm not. In the morning I get dressed because I'm standing to benefit, and my partner brought out the biggest issue in this debate, which I think is why you should vote for you. In this country, youth don't matter. They don't care about us. They trample over us. They use our paychecks to pay for the Viagra drugs of our grandparents because our grandparents vote. There's a lot of issues that come to the forefront of politics that really affect us. It's always the old that lead us to the war. It's always the young that fall in the war. And so if we're not willing to have a say in how we're being governed, then we're throwing that away. And how do we do that? Well, if we all get together and prove that we are a group that needs to be listened to, that we are a group that matters, that we are a group with power, then we're going to be treated as such within the political context of this country. So if you care about you, you should go out there and vote for you. I'm going to finish this off by talking about the office of the citizen. In a democracy, it's not the president who really wields the power, because who appoints the president? We do. And if you're in this position of being a citizen with your vote, if you're not doing your job, you're failing out on behalf of the others in your country. You're failing out on the behalf of yourself. You're failing out on your duty to history. So if you want to go with cynicism, obscurity, go vote opposition. But if you want to vote, and if you want to make a difference in history, and if you want to be optimistic, and if you want to risk being called too idealistic, please get out there and vote. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've heard a lot of talk about history, but may I be completely honest and frank with you, we are within history now. We have the opportunity to create a new history. We have an opportunity, a duty to create a new history. And we are given that opportunity right here in this debate. With this conversation that we are having about voting, this may be one of the most important conversations that we have in our lives. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this debate down in 3 different ways, similar to that of the last speaker. The first way, does voting within the system we have currently right now make a true change? Secondly, do we have the duty as a society to vote? And finally, is there a better way to better our system? So let's do the first point. Does voting within the system we have make a true change? Now I think we've heard this a lot on the talk of the first 2 benches about how our system is really broken. And I think that side opposition made it completely clear that the first government bench had this flowery, this idealistic language, and that remains true. Ladies and gentlemen, we do not have a choice as American citizens. We do not have a choice who we put in power. And that power, as they even admitted, is so immense and so dire to our daily lives. Well, frankly, I want a choice. And I think that the only choice I have is to walk away from that broken system. Until I can step beyond that system and fix that system, I don't want to be a part of it, and I believe that neither should you. And also, they completely ignored the point of the lobbies. Half of the system that's broken isn't even the system. They say, let's vote, let's be a part of the system. The only way we can fix the system is privileged to be within the system. Are you ignoring the fact that outside the system, there are power strings more powerful than that? As Danielle pointed out in her first speech, which was largely ignored without the debate, it's the lobbyists, a lot of people that we're not even electing, the bureaucracy, the people that we don't even have a vote over, that are controlling our lives. And frankly, if I have to just put one more person into power, the President of the United States, who's not going to stand up to those people, who historically has not stood up to those people, I don't want to do it. Sam.
You opened up your speech talking about history. So what's your history going to look like? In 2008, citizens 18 to 24 years old didn't vote again.
So what? I say let's all not vote. I don't say just let the 18 through 24. I want the 36-year-olds, the 47-year-olds, the 52-year-olds. I want everybody not to vote, because you know what that would do? Like my partner pointed out in her extension, which was completely ignored by you. What would that do? The collective would make the difference. That's when we unite. We unite together. We unite through the failure of our system. But I'll get to that later on in my speech. I'd like to continue on this point. They also said that voting is our voice. This is the only voice we've got, ladies and gentlemen. Well, frankly, that sucks. Because if this is my voice, if my ballot is all I've got, well, I'd rather spend my day standing up here talking to you, because I think that makes more of a difference. I think that my voice, this is my voice. Allow me to use it. Don't let me put it on a piece of paper, a piece of scrap paper that's going to be lost in a box, a sea of paper. I don't want that. I want to speak to you. I want to individually address this issue. Voting is not a choice. Voting is a facade. And until we acknowledge that, until we walk beyond that, we'll never walk beyond the system, and voting will never actually mean what it used to mean, Jacob.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but doing nothing solves nothing, right?
Sir, if you think that we're doing nothing, then you've not been listening at all. Just like our presidents have not been listening to us. We're not saying do nothing. In 1960s, when the civil rights activists were marching down the street, it weren't that they weren't doing nothing. They were talking, they were voicing their concern, making themselves heard. And that's exactly what I hope we're doing here today. My second point, do we have the duty to society to vote? They talk a lot about how we need to protect democracy. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if democracy has stopped protecting us, I say then it is no longer democracy, and it is no longer worth protecting. Because that's what government is supposed to do, right? That's the social contract that we agreed to, right? Isn't it? That's what I was always taught. And it, ladies and gentlemen, it has failed us. It is no longer protecting us. And therefore I say, it is void. And I would like to walk away from it. And then he also says, in his last speech, he says, because others didn't have the right to vote, we have the duty. We are such arrogant to stand up here. Well, I say we are more arrogant to just take 20 minutes out of our day and slip our paper into the box and do nothing and ignore the fact that that's not actually helping those people that are disenfranchised. I think that it is more arrogant of us to actually go day to day, year to year, election cycle to election cycle, and just think that everything's okay. I say we will stop being arrogant when we actually stand up, walk without the system, take that risk. I think that society has led us to believe that we are so entrenched in this system that we can't bring down this system. We have no other choice but this system, that we have to work with it. And ladies and gentlemen, that is not the case. And that brings me to my third and final point. Is there a better way to better our system? We need to step beyond what we know. We need to step beyond the textbooks that we've been taught as children. We need to step beyond, our forefathers building up the Constitution and the president and the Democrats and the Republicans. We need to step beyond that and ask ourselves what we actually want as American citizens, what we actually expect from our government. The collective change, as my partner explained during her extension, is the only way to do this. It's not that I don't want to vote, I don't feel like voting, I think that my vote is powerless. It's that I feel us not voting together is powerful. I feel that if we collectively take our ballots, rip them, burn them, throw them out, whatever, get rid of it, that will make a change. That's when people will look at us and say, what is it that you want? And that's when we can have a true conversation with our government about what we want and, most importantly, what we deserve. As the youth, as the extension of the last opposition team, the youth, us in this room, we're the ones to do it. We're the ones who are going to have to deal with the repercussions in the future, and I think we're the only ones that can make that collective change. So when it comes November 4th, when it comes Election Day, don't ask yourself, who do I want to be president? Ask yourself, what kind of system do I want my president to run? And Only until then, until we actually fix the system. It doesn't matter who the candidates are. It doesn't matter what party you're a part of. Only until we have the right system, the true system that is America, built up from the ground back in the day. Until we have that system, well, I just don't want to vote. Thanks.
Shake hands.
What's up, brother? Partner.
I want to thank our 8 debaters for their performance tonight. Some of these debaters have been debating for a couple of years. Some of them only debating for a couple of months. Just because you've never debated doesn't mean you can't, doesn't mean you can't try. Debating, we saw people up here who have personal power through building communication skills. And the Lawrence Debate Union exists to offer you that opportunity. Come and join us on Monday nights, 6 p.m. at 475 Main Street. Become one with us and learn that communication skills can create personal power. If you don't want to go to a debate tournament, that's fine, because we're going to have an intramural debate league and we're going to give out cash prizes. And I understand that's a universal motive. So if anybody's interested in that, please sign up here. Please feel free to speak to the debaters. One final thing I want to say, the positions argued this evening do not necessarily represent the personal positions of the people speaking, because we feel it's important to understand many different sides of issues, so eventually you make a decision. The debater uses the best argument they have for the side they're given. The citizen should pick their side based on the best arguments. Thank you.
All right, you're my class.
And then I got down, I was like, oh, thank you so much. Shall we go? Dude.
I'll go sign up my friend.
Ever make so frustrating to watch. One of the things I work on so many ideas that relate to I live in a free society. I have a question. I know enough to do this.
Yeah, get it on.
Sign up after my roommate. Sign up. Oh, yeah. You want to sign up Logan for this room?
I know. I get up there. I'll be there all day.
Get the sweatshirt. He was good. Yeah, he was good.
I did. I said, like, the collective voting thing, like, we've already tried collectively not voting. It didn't work. Majority of kids don't vote. Yeah.
Bottom half of your spacesuit.
But I have class on Monday, so I have to play game out. I don't know if you want to
Karen's mom.
Okay, I'll just think about it.
John Sam. How are you?
It was like showing up like
Mine's like, and yours is like,
yeah. I'll be in the office.
right, we got
Oh, really? You just do that when you have an argument?
Well, I mean,
We each have this world together.
Yeah.
We're saying that to represent us.
Oh, okay, okay. Because the first time I went around, I was like, did he want to do that? But I guess, as time went on, that's cool, man.
My bad, yo. That's my beat. Yo, I'm tired. I just got out of class. Like, British